Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to another video. So, today we're talking about childhood trauma, not just what it is, but how it quietly shapes adult behavior in ways that many people don't connect back to their childhood. And like, we're thinking about what if some of the habits, reactions, or patterns that we struggle with today aren't necessarily personality flaws, but adaptations that your nervous system learned years ago so that you can survive? You see, trauma doesn't always look like a memory you can name. Sometimes it looks like anxiety that you can't explain, or relationships that feel all exhausting, and reactions that just seem out of place at the moment. So let's talk about it. Our childhoods shape who we become, right? Not just the memories we hold, but how our brains, our bodies, and our behaviors develop. So today we're exploring what researchers mean when they talk about childhood trauma and just how these experiences in our early years continue to affect the people we are years later. So, what is childhood trauma? Well, trauma in childhood refers to frightening, harmful, overwhelming, or threatening experiences that happen to us before adulthood. Now, these can include abuse, physical, sexual, or some kind of neglect, or some kind of instability, or some chronic stress. So, scientists use the terms adverse childhood experiences or ACEs to capture these events, and studies estimate that many people experience at least one form of trauma early in life, as many as 70% of people. And why does it matter, really? Well, when a child experiences trauma, it doesn't just stay in the past. The brain that's developing is going to adapt, not in many healthy ways, right? It's going to adapt to the trauma and it's going to hold on to remnants of this trauma. So, one of the not so healthy ways in which the brain is changed is that stress alters the brain function and the structure. Early stress changes how parts of the brain develop. The parts that are involved in emotion, memory, and stress regulation will be affected. This includes the amygdala, which processes fear, the hippocampus, which deals with memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which is used for decision making and self regulation and self discipline. These areas are going to be affected. Additionally, we suffer from long-term stress response, where trauma can program the nervous system to stay in this survival or alert mode, which affects emotional regulation, your attention, and how threats are perceived, even in a safe environment. So a lot of us will be hyper cognizant of any kind of threat, or maybe be afraid, or tend to be more hyper vigilant than we need to be, which leaves us in a continuous state of stress. So, studies also show that there are cognitive effects that adults experience, that adults who experience trauma as children, even without psychiatric diagnosis, can have memory challenges or changes in their cognitive performance. Now, how do we see this in adulthood? How does it show up in adulthood? Well, childhood trauma doesn't always look the same for everyone, right? Some people might have attitudes, some people might be aggressive, some people might be ragey, some people might be meek, some people might be afraid, but there are recurring patterns that we can see in our behaviors that are triggered by these stresses or these traumas from the past. Some of the recurring patterns that studies show include emotional and psychological effects, where you will have like persistent anxiety, maybe an anxiety disorder, feelings of sadness or feeling worthless. Then there's the chronic stress response, where we have, mood swings and hypervigilance. Sometimes we have trouble with emotional regulation, or we have unexpected reactions to stress. You ever had those periods where you're just like, I can't believe I'm behaving like this, or I can't even control it? It's just happening, and it's like you're losing your mind. So those are things that are coming from your ACEs, from, your early childhood experiences that you may have even forgot. So now these patterns are linked to early childhood, shaping the nervous system and, the way that we process emotion. Another way is that we have behavioral and relational issues. Sometimes we'll have difficulty trusting others, and or repeating unhealthy dynamics, attracting the same kind of partners, giving too much, getting lost in our relationships. These are ways that the trauma shows up. We also have trouble forming stable, secure relationships, and trauma can affect the attachment styles, the way that people bond and feel safe with others. Another way is that we will see physical and health related outcomes. We have higher risk of chronic health issues like heart disease, diabetes, immune changes. Think about it. We're always stressed, so of course we're going to be always ill. We'll have persistent somatic symptoms like pain or sleep disturbance, because trauma dysregulates the body stress system, and this causes emotional and physical things. So let's say we have these stress symptoms, we have the chemicals produced by stress, then of course the body is going to have aches, right? We're going to have physical aches because we're holding on to these chemicals. We also have just general life outcomes where sometimes, we're just exposed to more mental health conditions. And this is what the studies show. Conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and employment issues, we're just lower functioning later in life. And that can affect the way that we just process, the way that we live, the way that we're able to achieve and be productive. Now, the problem with childhood trauma is that it can be hard to see in adult life. Sometimes we forget the trauma, right? So it's not always obvious, and sometimes people don't have the conscious memory, or the experience weren't really recognized at the time. And these experiences can shape patterns of thought, behavior, feelings, and just self-belief decades later. Researchers describe this not just as what happened, but how the body and brain hold the experience, even when the mind isn't actively remembering. Now, there is a book called The Body Holds the Score, where it talks about, experiencing trauma and how the body manifests these kinds of trauma symptoms. I think a lot of times we don't realize that the way that we are just manifesting life, the way that we're living, is coming out of our trauma, out of our pain. And sometimes it's even pain that we've forgotten. So, how do we get from trauma, even unconscious trauma, to understanding how to heal in our adulthood, right? There has to be a bridge that takes us from one place to the other. Understanding how childhood trauma continues to influence our adult life is the first step. In the next video, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to have a series, and we'll explore specific behaviors like emotional regulation struggles, attachment issues, and just coping mechanisms, and how they connect back to the early childhood experiences. We'll discuss various behaviors and how we can, use the knowledge that we have about trauma and and the coping mechanisms that people have used in the past. We'll use some of the studies that have been done in the past by psychiatrists and other experts to create coping skills, improve our ability to cope in our adult life, and just be able to be aware of some of the behaviors that are coming out of our trauma. So, if this topic resonates with you or someone you know, you're not alone, of course, and there is research and support out there. Let's continue to learn about our traumas and our coping mechanism together. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for video 2, where we discuss attachment styles and how we learn to attach based on our trauma or our childhood experiences. As always, thank you for watching, and share this video with someone who you know would benefit from it. As I always say, be blessed, be balanced, be good to each other and to yourself, and be the change you want to see. Be blessed, blissful, and blooming. And I'll see you next time.
The luxury breathing, but I don't think I'm living. Yeah, my mama be tripping, saying you acting different, cause I feel so alone.